Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is Red Lines, a show where we dive into daring subjects and cross some red lines of political speak. Today with me, I have Caolan Robertson, and we're going to be talking about why should you care about Ukraine if you don't care, from a pragmatic point of view.
So my name is Caolan Robertson. I've been full-time based here in Ukraine for the last 4 months, and I've been traveling all across the front lines to the documentary about Kherson, the drone attacks that are happening there now, coming out with a new film that goes all the way from Pokrovsk to Suja, which was filmed last week. Definitive film about drones, and the future of warfare. So, yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Awesome. Well, I would say nice to meet you, Kaylin, but I know you very well. We happen to be friends in real life, and I probably see more of Kaylin than anyone else that I've met in Kyiv so far. Today, we're going to discuss a little bit of what pragmatic support for Ukraine looks like. So, as Kaylin said 2 seconds ago before we switched on the recording, if you're a heartless, soulless person and you don't care about Ukraine, why should you care in monetary value? Because I think a lot of people don't support Ukraine, well, because they don't care, and it's okay. But the thing is that Ukraine has a lot to offer that A, Russia doesn't have to offer, and B, you're not going to be able to have access to if Russia takes over, and that will be your biggest adversary taking it over. So I would say that natural resources are one of the biggest components that no one's talking about because no one's realizing how much we need those natural resources and how many of those there are in Ukraine. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, yeah, this it's exactly what you just opened with. There are a number of people in the US, millions and millions of people who don't care about Ukraine because either they're brainwashed by Russian propaganda and think that Ukraine is somehow instigating this war, or they're just it's not our war, who gives a crap, they're just basically being pretty much heartless about their fellow Europeans. We're not that far away. Ukraine is not that far away culturally and physically from the US. It's the largest country in Europe. But putting all that aside, and putting aside all of that, there is over $2 trillion worth of natural resources underneath the ground here in Ukraine that will be incredibly useful to the US and the modern world. This isn't just coal, this isn't just the sand in Bakhmut. This is the type of stuff that we need for phones, for weapons. This is for stuff that the modern world suddenly needs a lot of.
This is
So it's really
also
useful.
it's also, if I may interject, if you know anything about lithium and you know anything about lithium ion batteries and about electric vehicles, the reason why Elon Musk might be so supportive of Russia is because he probably thinks that what's going to happen if Russia wins is Russia's going to take over all the lithium rich places and they're going to give it to Musk to use for free. That's a very naive thing, but this is one of the factors for which it's so, so good for Elon Musk to go against Ukraine because, of course, he doesn't want to pay for it.
Yeah, definitely. Also, Musk already gets a huge amount of his, I think it's cobalt. I can't remember what exactly the ingredient is from Russia. He has massive business relationships with Russia that he uses to build his cars and his power storage. So that's also part of it. It's not just that. He's got financial ties to Moscow for his materials. And yeah, he probably thinks if Russia takes Ukraine, then he'll get a great deal and all of that stuff. But no American will benefit if Russia takes over Ukraine because they aren't going to sell it to America, any of the stuff that they need at any kind of reasonable rate, and to the rest of Europe, because A, they'll be pissed off that our country supported Ukraine for so long, but B, that's just how Russia operates. They'll sell things to the highest bidder and they'll hoard most of it for themselves. So this is one of the reasons that Crimea happened in 2014 as well. Crimea and its land, which is sitting on massive reserves of gas. I can't remember the total amount of it, but it's the equivalent to other European countries combined worth of natural resources that Russia are stealing from the ground there and going to be using inside their own country. But Lindsey Graham said this yesterday. He went on Fox News and basically said, Americans, if you don't care about Ukrainians, if you don't care about Russia or whatever it is, fine. But America will massively benefit from a future in which Ukraine survives. And that is a future of business relationships, of shared technology and warfare. The drones that are being adapted here are at breakneck speed, and Americans and Israelis are desperate for the new intel and information of not just what the Ukrainians have developed in their drones, but how they were used in real life battlefield situations. Massive military use, massively, incredibly important. And Ukraine will share that information with the States after this war is done. Zelensky's put it into some of his deals and packages. So if you say, oh, my taxpayer dollars are going to Ukraine, and they're all being wasted, America will get that money back tenfold if they allow Ukraine to win and they continue to support it. So it's not really discussed enough, but it's what the messaging should be put to more Republicans, you know.
Well, I do want to say that tax dollars are not being wasted on Ukraine in general because that's a misconception to begin with. Taxes that
Mhm.
are being sent to Ukraine are taxes that people's grandfathers paid at the time at which these weapons were produced.
Yeah,
Your taxes are actually going on producing new weapons, and it's not most of the money that is being announced. 90%, I think it's actually more. It's 98% of the money that's being announced for Ukraine is actually stays in the United States and creates jobs. I just wanted to make that very clear because a
yeah,
lot of people have that in misconception. Also, I did find out it's 900 billion cubic meters of gas.
it's
That is,
huge. Yeah,
yeah,
which is
that's
being
the
stolen by Russia. But yeah, no, I mean, when I say, oh, our tax dollars are being wasted, this is kind of quoting the stuff you see on Twitter, and the same kind of talking points that come from the Kremlin and then are repeated by people like Charlie Kirk, who are either paid by the Kremlin or are too stupid to believe the propaganda that they're putting out. So it's just like very, very depressing. But hopefully, more people will start to listen to these viewpoints. Again, it was nice to see Lindsey Graham bringing this up on Fox, because those are the people that need to be listening to it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And also another thing is that like what people don't realize is like, oh, okay, well, so we're just not going to get that. It's not that you're not going to get that. Is that if you let Ukraine fall, Russia is going to get that. And then that's your problem because Russia is going to get even stronger and even richer. And that's a problem for the United States because Russia is not a friend to the US. Russia hates the US and Russia says that so avidly on their TV that it kind of drives me crazy that people like refuse to believe it or refuse to see it. I saw something very funny the other day in my comments on TikTok that actually pertains to this situation, which I posted a video and it was me walking to dinner with my friends and there was an air raid in the background. And the point of the video was the air raid in the background, not a Saturday evening dinner with my friends. But some American person found the video and they were like, oh, must be nice to live in Ukraine. I work 2 jobs to barely afford rent or something like that. Because they thought that I was just like making a video about going to dinner with friends, right? First of all, not the point. And I responded to them saying like, hey, what's fun about it? The air raid. Also, like, I work multiple jobs. What's your point? But there was a Russian troll. So this American person is anti-Ukrainian and they're pro-Russian, right? Because they're obviously commenting something really ugly on a video of a Ukrainian person who's walking down the street in an air raid. There was a Russian troll there in the comments who is also obviously anti-Ukrainian, very pro-Russian. That Russian troll found the comment of this man saying that he works 2 jobs to barely afford rent and literally said, "Man, you're a fucking loser." And it's so funny to me because you didn't have to do that, right? You didn't have to do that at all. Like Russians don't like you. Russians don't respect you. Russians are not friends to you. And the people who have been like fooled into thinking that somehow Russia is like good for the US, Russians hate you. Like you as
Yes.
Americans, when you come to Russia, they rob you, they take money out of your bank accounts, they detain you, they hate you. It's not fun, it's not cool. Russians in mass absolutely despise America.
Yeah,
Now
and they
that
say it on television. Like, they say it
all
all
the
the
time.
time.
But for some reason, people like don't want to believe it, right? Because I think that the people that we're talking to, and I don't want to say this, like the people that we're trying to reach here, right, with this conversation, there is this sense of an American greatness, right? And because a lot of the people in America in general haven't really been out of the country, they have this idea that people consider America to be this like American dream country where Americans are so amazing and everybody wants to move to America. And that was the case 10 to 20 years ago, but it's not the case anymore. And it's hard to see if you're not out of the country a lot, right? Because America is huge. A lot of people don't travel. Like you can travel around America. Like it's a huge freaking place. But at the same time, I think that there is this skewed idea that everyone wants to be American and everyone wants to come to America. Most Europeans don't see America the same way anymore as they used to, and
Yeah.
Russians absolutely hate it. It doesn't matter how much our TV in America shows us that we're great and we're awesome and we're the coolest. Most people around the world actually don't think that anymore. And I
No.
think that's where the perception gap also forms.
Yeah, completely. But Americans who are Republican, who are putting out anti-Ukraine propaganda, always perplexes me because the Republican Party, and as right wingers, you should be against communism. Look at any of the Victory Day parades, look at any celebratory event that's held in Moscow. It's red flag waving, hammer and sickle waving communism. Turn on a Moscow television and they will be putting out anti Ukraine propaganda as if it's the 1950s, endlessly talking about destroying America, America being the enemy. This is who they are. They hate you. They say they hate you, and they are at war with you in many different ways. They disrupt the American information system with their putrid disinformation. They've been doing sabotage attacks all across the United States. And again, they put out on their televisions all the time literal speeches about how they want to see America completely destroyed. And then you go to America and you see half of the Republican Party talking about how Putin is their hero. Well, it's also because they've been buying this propaganda that's been putting out on things like the Tenet media scandal. Russia Today still exists on Twitter, and they see it and they think, oh, big strong man, Putin cool, Ukraine bad. And they don't really even know why. Well, actually, if you are you listening to this and you're a Republican and you're hating Ukraine, you think that Putin is based and MAGA and Christian, the commie, the closest thing that Europe basically has now to 1776 and the battle for independence, dignity, freedom is what is happening in Ukraine right now. That is the same loyalty, the same spirit, and the same battle for freedom that you once fought for and that you should hold strong. Reagan would have said the same thing back in the older days of the Republican Party. This is a battle for independence and for getting away from totalitarianism and government control. Putin silences free speech. You say you love free speech. Elon Musk loves free speech. He would throw you in jail in seconds for criticizing the Kremlin. The Ukraine is every single day getting more and more Western, and it is the closest thing that Europe has to the battle that Republicans should believe in, and it has such similar values. This country is steeped in amazing history, but also this country has traditional family values. It is a Christian country. It's freedom loving, and it's exactly the values that you hold strong and always have against red flag waving, basically Antifa. You know Antifa in Portland that you hate because they beat you up for saying things that are right wing? Those are the people you're idolizing sitting in the Kremlin. The major version of it is the definition of totalitarianism and fascism, the things that make you have hold on to the right to bear arms in case the government turns against you. Well, Putin is that type of government that makes you want to hold on to your guns. So if you're a Republican and you're listening to this, that is what this is. That is the same battle that you would have fought in your hearts for a free America. And it's important to remember that and to listen to that.
I think that's a very great point. And what I want to add to that point, right, is that there is always this narrative that like our sons and daughters are going to have to go fight for Ukraine if Ukraine gets into NATO and we're going to have to fight a war that's not ours. No, if Ukraine gets into NATO, you're not going to have to fight any wars. You're going to have to fight a war if Ukraine does not get into NATO. But the benefit of Ukraine being in NATO is that, there are so many American families that have to move every year, every 2 years, because American soldiers are being stationed in Europe or somewhere else worldwide, right? Because American military is the most skilled in terms of being able to operate multiple different weapons, having a lot of training, having participated in almost every war, right? So there is a lot of knowledge there. The Ukrainian army today is the only army that knows how to fight a war of defense on your own territory where someone invaded you, not fight against like a bunch of people in flip-flops with like makeshift guns. Ukrainian soldiers, and our army is growing, will be able to substitute for American soldiers on NATO bases worldwide and provide that coverage so a lot of your sons, daughters, husbands, brothers can come back home and be stationed in America close to home. So you don't have to not see them for 6 months or a year or 2 years, right? So you don't have to wonder where the hell in the world they are. So you and your kids don't have to get up and get moving to different countries every year or two or so. And that's reality. And I mean, like, that's I'm not trying to like preach some crazy propaganda. It's reality. That's one of the things that Zelensky was offering in his plan for Ukraine's victory. He would like to alleviate the burden of having to do that from American soldiers and substitute them with Ukrainian soldiers.
Yeah, and it's also well, I didn't know so much about that point, but I guess it's also about having allies in the world. The world that is becoming more dangerous, the world that is seemingly falling apart. Right wingers always talk about the threat of China. Trump always talks about the threat of China and invading Taiwan. Right now, America needs as many allies as possible while the BRICS forms and America's enemies get more and more powerful. Well, you've got the largest country in Europe sitting on the most resources that's ready to be your best ally. And even from a strategic military point of view, like you're bringing up, that is incredibly useful. They Republicans like the industrial complex in a lot of ways, and like having a strong army that isn't weak. Well, that includes having strong allies. um, so yeah, and it's just depressing seeing Charlie Kirk, write, "Dear Putin, we don't want to go to war with you." Reminds me of a child writing like a letter to Santa Claus. Dear Santa, dear Putin, all I want for Christmas this year is for you to be big and strong, and for Ukraine to please don't nuke us. It's just silly behavior. Grow up. This is what needs to be countered in a lot of ways, because I don't think he represents the views of most Republicans. I think it is a very small sect of a very online MAGA movement that is silly, very silly.
Yeah, definitely very silly. So, at the risk of trying to sound a little bit too much like a Ukraine's PR agent, also, Kaylin, how many brands of Ukrainian clothing have you seen since you've gotten here? And trust, like, just entertain me here because this is going somewhere.
I haven't been shopping for clothing since I got here. I came with everything I need, so I don't know brands of Ukrainian clothing. I'm not sure. What about
Okay,
you?
well, so you're a bad person to ask that question, which is surprising because you are a very fashionable man. So one of the other things that I think people do not think of pragmatically and frugally when they think about Ukraine is, so you mentioned that Trump talks about China and the threat of China. A lot of the manufacturing happens in China and it's cheap to do in China because they don't pay their workers enough.
Yeah,
So manufacturing is cheap to do in Ukraine, not because they don't pay workers enough, but because a level of life and salaries are different, right? And even if we raise them like twofold or threefold, it would still be a lot cheaper than manufacturing it in the United States. Ukraine has a buttload of factories, and I mean like such a huge amount of factories. Most Ukrainian brands do not make their clothing somewhere else or in China because we have an enormous amount of factories. And I mean, like, not just clothing factories. We have to, like, I mean, textile factories are huge and we have a lot of them. Also, we have a lot of like places like Zaporizhia and in the east of Ukraine, we have a lot of factories that are not being used, but that have a lot of equipment that could be used for something else. We have a lot of space. For the amount of space that Ukraine has, we do not have a lot of people. So there are a lot of open fields and places where you can build factories and you can build things, right? Especially in Crimea as well. IT, AI, robotics, prosthetics. We produce a lot of prosthetics and modern technology in Ukraine. So a lot of tech and a lot of textile can be moved from being produced in China to being produced in Ukraine. And China's economy depends on the United States companies producing their stuff there. And in reality, to someone, it could sound crazy, but like Apple could literally move their production from China to Ukraine.
yeah,
And that would take a while, but it would work. And you would be doing that production in an allied country. And it's not like you have to create a new ecosystem for that production to work. When I say most Ukrainian brands and stores and Ukrainian, the reason why we've been able to create so many weapons during this war and so much tech and so much advancement for the thing to substitute for the things that we don't have is because we already have the infrastructure for all of this.
Hmm.
And no one usually knows this. No one usually talks about it. It's like, Ralph Lauren used to have a factory in Ukraine. Like there used to be quite a few like designer brands that were um, sewing their stuff here, and it's
I've seen
and
a
it's
huge amount of stuff like this grown here, and I've been to Zaporizhia this month and saw massive space and resort and train networks that connect and move everything, and the road systems that connect everything directly to the rest of Europe. I've seen warehouses where they've been making thousands of drones a day at breakneck speeds, which was shocking to first see in Ukraine. I didn't think that any of this was happening, and so much was being created here at such a great rate. But yeah, that makes total sense, which will be amazing after this war because all of those factories can be used to build so many different varieties of things. And you have a workforce that works extremely hard. Like, I do not see
yeah,
Ukrainians take a day off. Like,
yeah. I
they're
mean,
incredibly work.
also some of to like prove my point, some of the biggest innovations in tech have happened from Ukraine. So like PetCube is a pet camera that like most people have in their homes in America. It's Ukrainian.
Mhm.
Grammarly is Ukrainian. PayPal was co-founded by a Ukrainian, and like this list keeps going and going and going. MacPaw is one of the most popular like decluttering MacBook and iMac softwares, also Ukrainian. Like a lot of these things happen here, but people just don't pay attention. So it's like we already have the infrastructure to do a lot of these things, and we're only advancing. I think one of the best examples of
Wow.
that is Nova Poshta, right? Like in America, you have a giant monopoly by Jeff Bezos, which is Amazon, which is a marketplace. So if you want to buy something and you want it to get to you tomorrow or the day after, you have to buy it on Amazon. Everything else is 3 to 5 business days. In Ukraine, you can buy it from any store and it's going to get to you tomorrow or the day after because they ship it with Nova Poshta. And it's not a monopoly in terms of being just a market. It's not a marketplace. It's just a shipping service. And if you think, oh, Ukraine is much smaller than the US, sure, it's the size of Texas, but the funny thing is, France is much smaller than Ukraine. So is Germany, and so is literally every country in Europe. And they also have shipping 3 to 5 business days because it's not about how long it takes to get from point A to point B, it's about logistics. So Ukraine is really freaking good at figuring out logistics.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was blown away by the postal service here and how efficient it was because I had a package delivered to her son when I was there that was being destroyed. The city was being destroyed while I was there, and the postal service still ran. And now the postal service has been expanded to Ireland, Great Britain, France, lots of different places in the last few months. And I've had a retainer for the 19th delivered only a few days ago from London, where the mold was, to here, and it came in like 2 days. It cost $20. There is nothing like that that exists in Europe or the United States. The fact it actually arrives and the fact it arrives quickly, it's like the most perfect system, which was mind blowing. Same with the trains, all run on time and are cheap. Same with everything, because there's a mindset in Ukraine that I've noticed where it's like doing things properly and just getting things done, which you don't really have in the States as much anymore in Britain. There's problems with over unionization, bureaucracy. It takes like 6 months to get a road built in London, and they bombed a supermarket in Kharkiv a few weeks ago, and it was open 2 days later. This would take 50 years in Britain to reopen that supermarket. There would be 400 council meetings about what the windows should look like. So
I mean,
that is what the most mind-blowing thing is.
here's the thing. So for people to not think that I'm literally propaganda, I will say, okay, yes, we do open a lot of things. We rebuild buildings and supermarkets and stuff of necessity very fast. But I will say the roads here, some of them have been being built for the past 30 years, and
Yeah,
like
it's getting
and they
better.
still look. I was in a neighborhood, and it's a sleeping neighborhood. It's like if you were to think of like New York geography, it's probably like very deep in the Bronx, and concrete on the road there looks like patchwork. You might think I'm exaggerating, but no, it was literally all different types, textures, colors, and like, I don't know, mixes of concrete just in a patchwork on the freaking ground. And that was ridiculous. I never want
Yeah.
my car to ever touch that ground again. But with that said, a lot of other stuff is done very well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, I think it's more about what has been happening in the last few years with, again, the Nova posters, the way that that's developed has been rapid. The tech, the factories I've been seeing. Yeah, it's pretty insane. But I didn't know any of this stuff was happening when I first got here until I started to see it everywhere. I was like, oh my gosh, there's a brand new video game that's just come out about
Stalker
Stalker
too.
2 and Chernobyl. Like,
Which, you know what? I'm so happy you mentioned it because I just saw a tweet, or rather a Telegram channel screenshot, and basically all the profits, or like a large amount of profits from Stalker 2, are going to go to the armed forces of Ukraine. And it was highly advertised everywhere. And Russian bloggers are complaining because it is charting as a top rated game, to most, like the most downloaded game in a really long time in Russia. And people are
really?
obviously paying to download it. Yeah. And all of the profits are going to the armed forces of Ukraine. So all of these like Russian bloggers are losing their goddamn mind.
You can imagine them like trying not to enjoy it while they're playing it. They're like, "Oh, this is like," just hating the
No,
process.
they're just complaining. They're like, "You dumb population, like what are you doing? It's been stipulated so clearly that all of the like profits are going to the armed forces of Ukraine, and the like Johnnies over here that are stupid are downloading it. Like, what are you doing? Like, look at what you're doing. You're blowing up the charts. This is like the most downloaded game in Russia." And I'm just like,
That's
dude,
hilarious. Oh my God. It
it's
looks
like,
good
dude,
though.
Russians don't care. Honestly, like they don't care. They just want a game, and it's like, yeah, pay your money. Yeah, I like, you know what I would want to happen. I would want them to purchase the game and then for it to be location locked.
Oh my God.
So
That's
like you
funny.
spent the money on it, but you can't play it.
No, but yeah, that would be. I thought you meant like location where you can see where the person is that's playing it.
No, 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 location locked. Like as in like, you can't watch Sex and the City on Netflix in Ukraine, but you can in America.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Mhm.
then this is but then this is when Russians actually get upset. They call them, what do they call them when the Russians have left since 2022, left Russia for Europe? They say they're Amazon refugees. Have you seen this?
They're what?
Because they're Amazon Russians that have left Russia since 2022 are like Amazon refugees. They're basically people who were absolutely fine when Russia was bombing civilian hospitals in Syria. Were fine when Crimea was stolen. Were fine when the Donbass was bombed. Were fine when the full-scale invasion happened. But when they couldn't get their Amazon parcels, that's when it was too far. That's when they went to Europe and became refugees, because that's a step too far. Never mind any of the atrocities. Never mind when
Oh
you
yeah,
were
when Dolce and Gabbana left the market.
now this now they can't cope anymore now, because it's now this is a big part of it, so maybe you'll get a few more refugees from this.
Yeah, I
God.
mean, it's actually very, very funny. Like, I find it hilarious because when the full-scale invasion started, and a lot of Ukrainians started uplifting Ukrainian brands and Ukrainian businesses and advertising Ukrainian brands and businesses for free. I did that. There was this like Russian hair blogger that I followed because she has this like a red mane of hair, and she like has some, I don't know, like serums for hair growth, whatever, hair density. I don't know, but she's a hair blogger.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't know, like half a year into the invasion, obviously I unfollowed her immediately when the invasion started because she went on with her like life as if nothing is happening and didn't say anything.
Of
And
course.
half a year later, I was like curious to see what's like come of her, right? And so she started like promoting, because she used to promote foreign brands. Obviously, foreign brands don't work with her anymore. So her entire page is just her talking about amazing Russian jeans from a Russian like manufacturer, amazing like Russian, hair stuff from Russian manufacturers. And like, this stuff isn't amazing. She's like, it's not that they're uplifting their stuff because they like it, it's because they have no choice,
That's funny.
right?
Yeah, and I can imagine being one of those
It's
beauty
like we
bloggers
are
and being like,
doing it
"Oh,
because
this is
we
my
want.
favorite one," and it's like, just your hair is a disaster.
But that's like sort of the thing. It's like we are doing this. Ukrainians started like we can work with foreign brands. In fact, more foreign brands wanted to work with us when the full scale invasion broke out because it was like cool and trendy and stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we could have charged our own businesses more because now we have this into like an American market or a British market or like an Australian market. But instead, we were advertising our own businesses for free, and we were working with foreign businesses, right? Russians are like charging out of the wazoo their own businesses because they need to continue making money somehow, and they're just lying about liking them because they've never paid attention to them before.
Yeah, typical Russian mentality, though. This is how it is. It's just how it is in Russia. I don't think I understood that until I came to Ukraine and actually understood how much people at a mental and cultural core actually care about their own society and each other and people that come to volunteer and help. In Russia, it doesn't exist unless there's suitcases of filthy cash involved. No, you can't get anyone to do an effing thing. You can't get anyone to care about anything unless they're bribed or unless they're paid massively, which is why it's such a dump of a country. Like, it's why when these Americans go to Russia, they immediately say, "Oh my gosh, I got off the plane. I was robbed by the pilot." Before I even got off the plane, my suitcases were stolen. I was marched to an ATM. I couldn't do anything without being stopped every 2 minutes and having to pay bribes because that is how that country exists as a culture, and it's the complete opposite in Ukraine. Even here, working with brands and the amount of people that just wanted to help each other, or even help me with certain things, or with going to places or with driving to places. It's just unbelievable. I just didn't think it was a thing because also I stereotyped Ukraine as maybe being a bit like other Eastern European countries like Poland or Moldova, and Poland is not like that. No offense to Polish people, but it's not the same. It's extra special mentality that I've seen here. No, it's amazing, and I guess it manifests itself, like you said, through things like promoting their own brands as a moral standpoint. I think it's really cool.
Well, I actually want to add something. I think it's our own sort of like pride and joy. Like today when I needed to get a gown for an event that me and Kaylin are going to, I'm not gonna say when or what the event is, but anyways, I needed a black tie dress. And I don't own any of these because when else am I gonna go to a black tie event?
Hmm.
And I specifically wanted to find it from a Ukrainian designer because I thought it'd be appropriate. And anytime there is like an engagement with cameras or attention or anything like that, I want to be dressed in Ukrainian clothing.
Nice.
I try to buy as like I try to like buy most of my stuff Ukrainian, especially if it's something that I'm going to wear on air. Most of the times that you're going to see me wearing something on air, except for today, this is not Ukrainian, is usually Ukrainian brands because if someone were to ask like, "Oh, where's your sweater from?" I want to say that it was a Ukrainian brand because I want to help them, because if one day a ton of people are watching this, I want to help them. But going back to like the core of this conversation, the reason why Russia wants Ukraine so much is because Russia is a big, massive land of nothing. Most of Russia is taiga. Taiga is like a mud forest. It's literally like and I'm not being like mean. It's a mud forest. It's a forest with a lot of mud. Nothing grows there. In fact, Moscow is is translated as swamp from the original times that it was called it. And
Appropriate.
taiga is like a forest swamp, and it's cold. Nothing grows there. There is nothing there. It's a lot of nothingness. Russia wants Ukraine because Ukraine is a much smaller territory, but we have all the resources. We have like a ton of different climates. Like Odessa and Kherson and these cities are still warmer now. We
Yeah.
have like the things, and like I think this is going to be called an inferiority complex. But since I'm trying to appeal to Americans, usually it's easier to appeal to Americans through the lens of America. So we have the likes of Grand Canyon here. We
Yeah.
have the dunes here. We literally have, like, we have the mountains where you can ski. We
Hmm.
have the sea. Like, we have so much in Ukraine, and we have resources, and we have 30% of the world's richest black soil. Like, things grow here like they can't grow anywhere else. Like, in fact, this is a funny little bit, but Hitler, in at the time at which he invaded Ukraine, because most of the Ukraine took the most major hit, not Russia, in that invasion. They were taking out Ukrainian soil and trying to bring it to Germany.
Really?
Yeah, but that's not how it works. So obviously that didn't result in anything. But that was like one of the things, and it's not the first time someone tried to do that.
I've seen this actually when I was in Sumi last week. I was shocked. This soil reminded me of some of the farm soil that I grew up with in Ireland that I hadn't seen in Britain before, where like the more you walk on it, the thicker it gets on your shoes, and it's like just
Yeah.
this dark black. We were dropping mines in it to test out a new type of drone, so that
It's
was
like
fun. But
most of the soil in this country, you can penetrate. As in like it's like, well, that sounded very weird. It will grow
I
things.
understand. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
it's very, very cool. And that's why you get the watermelons of Kherson. That's why you have the grapes and the Odessa black wine. It's why you can grow
I
so
think I
many.
want to say it's fertile. So yeah, sorry, I just realized how incredibly weird that sounded 2 seconds ago. So I really need to change that. Most of the soil here is fertile. Like for instance, if I were to try and grow potatoes in my mom's front yard in her building in the center of the city of Lviv, where the dogs go to relieve themselves, it will likely grow
Yeah, 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 yeah. And it hasn't
because
been over
any random
farmed.
soil will likely be fertile.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is how American soil was for a long time before it was over farmed. But it's been looked after, the land has been looked after. It's kind of why it was sad though when I would go to Kherson and you'd see so many of these fields that should be growing beautiful fruits and vegetables because Ukraine feeds like 50% of African imports. Because they're mined because Russians mine them, so you
Mhm.
can't farm on them. And every now and then you'll see like a random exploding cow or something in the field, but it's really, 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 really sad and depressing. But yeah, beautiful. It's just it was quite amazing to like discover all of this on these journeys around the country and to
Yeah.
see it unfolding rather than just be told this information. But yeah, yeah. I mean, I always say that anyone that visits from America that's skeptical about Ukraine or would have written any of these anti-Ukraine posts a day would have a whole meant just as seeing and speaking to people. So it's interesting.
But that's also an interesting bit is that most Americans that did come here want to live here. I Most of the people that I've met who came here
Oh,
to
of
visit or
course.
volunteer, most want to move because it's like your perception of Ukraine doesn't come full until you actually come and see it here. Because it's, I don't know, like
Hmm.
I've never been to a country like this. I don't know how to, like, I don't quite know how to describe it.
No.
And also for those who might not want to invest into like natural resources or coal mines or gas or whatever, real estate. Real estate is such a big thing because right now real estate here is cheap. Like a nice apartment in the center of Kyiv is probably 100 to 150 grand tops. And I mean like a nice one, right? It's not going to be like that when Ukraine is in the EU. And also, a lot of Ukraine has to be rebuilt. And even the places that aren't ruined in the east have a lot of potential for new building because they're not as built up as the western part of
Hmm.
Ukraine is. Because that was closer to Russia and more influenced by Russia and had a lot more Russian businesses, not European businesses coming in. So obviously, naturally, not like Russia cares enough. So there is so much to do here. And I think that like people are really sleeping on it, especially American people, especially people who are retired with like savings or people with disposable income because you can invest it into Ukraine and it's going to pay off tenfold.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Unbelievable potential for the future in this country with a driven workforce, beautiful soil lands, and all the infrastructure that is needed. Which I guess is yeah, it's going to be yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I think that was actually very
So
productive. And I think we've covered every single angle from a pragmatic, well, no, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot more angles from a pragmatic point of view, like, building of missiles or building of defense tech in Ukraine, drones or manufacturing shells, or I mean, a lot of stuff that like, that we could be helping America do, but at the same time, I think that that's a subject for next time because
yeah.
we've covered so much that it's a lot to process in one single sitting. Do you have anything to add to a summary?
No, it's been really nice to talk about this.
Yeah,
No,
I
I mean,
think
I
it's a
think I really wanted to talk about, yeah,
no, no, go ahead.
the Republican side of things, which I'm glad that I covered. Well, just because of the amount of stuff I've seen on my newsfeed that is just
Yeah.
unhinged with MAGA. And so I really want to just talk about that and talk about the connection between actually Republican values and Ukrainian values and what that really means. So it was good to, yeah, it was good to talk about all these things.
Yeah, I honestly
Yeah.
feel like maybe we should do, we should do a show or something where we talk about these things about Ukraine that are like unknown to people, as in like, why should you support Ukraine if you're a heartless, like not as in like if you don't care, from like a pragmatic point of view. That'd be actually great.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much for
They would be
joining me
because
here
it's
today.
endless. There's a lot.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining me here today. And I know I'm going to see you here in the future. And I'm sure that our viewers and listeners would love to see you in the future here as well. I think you're one of our brightest guests. And I'm totally not biased on because this is one of my closest friends in Ukraine at all. At all.
Mhm.
But all right.
Well, it was great. Thank you for having me. It's always fun to come on the show.
Yeah, of course. So I hope this conversation has given you an insight into why Ukraine is useful for you and why it's convenient for you. Not why you should just care about it because, well, people are dying and, be a good person. But realistically, if you're a pragmatic person and you only care about value of where you put in your time, here is your reasoning. And I hope we've given you enough of it, or at least enough to think about, to maybe change your mind. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to hear more conversations like this in the future, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Also, give this video a like so, you can give it a little bit of help making it through the deep, dark webs. That was a weird one, but you know what I mean. Also, send it to a friend because you never know, maybe they'll enjoy it too. And of course, leave your comment with your questions, suggestions, reviews, constructive criticism, anything. I read all of them and I really enjoy hearing from you. Till next time.